Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'd actually like to just start with us beginning with a breath. And we begin with a breath to honor the breath that has been taken away. We honor the stars, we honor the sky, we honor the sun. We honor all living entities of the world. We honor the earth, we honor the soil, we honor the wind, we honor the fresh waters. We honor all ancestral spirits that sit at the foot of the world, and we humbly acknowledge our indebtedness to the ancestors and stewards of this land, who we know to be the Willow Sammamish people. When we do so, we are not simply giving tribute to people who no longer live here. Rather, we are asking permission and invitation by those co-presences who live on this land and whose ancestral energies are at work here with us now, that they continue to be present with us, that they allow us to do our work with humility, with kindness, with generosity, with care. We call on them so that we may attune to and resonate with their existence. I'd like to especially give honor to the ancestor Kenny Moses, who Dakota let me know earlier this morning was a cultural and spiritual worker for the Sammamish. We acknowledge our indebtedness to all more than human life, all the forces and energies of this land. We pay respect, we praise the waterways, we praise the salmon, the birds, the trees, the soil. We have to be aware that in this moment, living in this highly militarized society, we automatically think of resistance and power in terms of violence, in terms of domination and submission. Our liberation is not simply going to happen with fists and bullets. We have to understand that we are in this moment in a battle of the psyche. And that battle is going to be won on the terrain of spirits. Battle happens as we fortify our communities by transforming the poetics of our relations on this earth, la tierra, las piedras. We must change how we relate to each other and to the world. This is what indigenous ways teach us. The ways our ancestors guide us is through doing this work, by honoring our relations. Now, part of what we're doing with this land acknowledgement is to initiate a regular practice here on campus at UW-Bothell of consistently acknowledging the lands on which we live and work as those of the Sammamish Willow people, the people who continue to live on to struggle for this land. Through these practices, we not only pay tribute to the ancestors and stewards of the land, we recommit ourselves in each moment, at each step, with each small interaction every day, to the practice of social justice and the practice of liberation. In each action, each step of the way, we recommit to change our relationships to this land, to all the living entities of this land, and to our communities who continue to struggle and survive for this land. Now my friend Dakota will share with us more about the land protocol.
My name is Dakota Alcantara Kamatsu, and I was born and raised here at Coast Salish territory. My ancestors come from a place called Ludwat and Gunny on my father's side, and on my mother's side, my ancestors come from a place that dominating culture now calls Europe. and also from Ilocos. I'm not Coast Salish. However, in the time that I've been living here, I've been building a relationship to the life ways of this territory. And something that I've come to understand is that any time that we're gathering is a sacred time, and it's good for us to acknowledge the protocol that's existed in this territory since time immemorial. And part of this protocol is honoring those that have come before us. And those that come before us, a lot of times we think about as the human beings, we're talking specifically in this territory, the Sammamish people. And part of the reason why we honor those human beings is because they have a genealogical, a biological, a physical, and a spiritual, cultural commitment, responsibility to the well-being of this territory, to the well-being of all of our relatives here. And I think I need to, as part of this responsibility, acknowledge that when Western society came here, they literally told the Sammamish people, you no longer exist. You do not exist as a people anymore. You can go and live with one of these 3 tribes, but you no longer get to live in your land and be who you are. And I just want to speak about the unfairness of that, of somebody coming into imagine someone coming into your home and telling you your family no longer exists. You're not who you are. And so in honoring the Sammamish people for who they are, part of that is also honoring their relationship to this way of being. And part of this way of being is acknowledging the ancestors through song. And this is the way that the protocol happens here in Coast Salish territory. And from my understanding, there's kind of 2 parts. And we'll do the first part, and then I'll talk about the second part in a second. And the song, although we're here to talk about Indigenous performance, is not a performance. It's not a song where I'm performing to you or for you. It's a moment of resonance with Earth, with creation itself. So in this moment, I'm inviting each and every one of you to put your mind and your attention on your relationship to your ancestors, on your relationship to this earth that's right below you, on your relationship to the Salish, which is this body of water over here, your relationship to Eden Munster, which is that body of water over there, your relationship to the mountains that surround us, all of those beautiful mountains and the beings that live here, have lived here, and will live here forever and ever. And when we do it in this way, we also ask for those that are able to stand as a way to show our respect for those ancestors. So I'll ask that now, if we could all stand. And I'll just say one last thing is that when we do this kind of work, one thing I've been taught is that it actually disturbs the spirit to clap. So when we finish this moment, it would be good for us to just be in the moment.
In Entina iman mo phốt nan tàu tàu iman ma tàu iman mo phốt nan tàu tàu ta su ông cu nan no ani tàu tàu ta su ông cu nan no an ta su pin nen 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 no ani tàu tàu ta su pin nen 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 no an iman ma tàu iman ma tàu iman mo phốt nan tàu tàu
The teachings that have been shared with me, this is a good way for us to honor this lifeways and mitigate the impact that we're having by nature of being here on this land, mitigate the destruction that's been caused by a Western way of life, calling this place its home and displacing the ways of life that keep this place alive. Part of the protocol as you enter into another person's territory, from this perspective that I understand, is that every person that's coming to be a part of the work, and all of you are a part of this work by nature of being here, so thank you so much for coming, is that each of us is making a commitment, making a contribution to the people of this territory who have this responsibility, who have this relationship. And the way that this happens, and would happen in the old days, is an exchange of shells, and the shells were seen as a currency, as a way of trading and sharing wealth. In this culture, as we make an adaptation to this way of being here, the currency that is operating is an exchange of dollars and cents. And so I'm going to ask now, we've got this basket here, I'm going to pass this basket around and ask that each of us make a commitment, make a contribution to the well-being of the caretakers of this place. And one thing that I've been taught is that it doesn't matter the size of the contribution that you're making. What matters is that you're making a conscious decision to support the people whose land we are on right now. And I'll pass the basket. I'll start in the back so nobody has to be afraid or shy or be on the spot. And I'll just share with you a little bit about what will happen with this contribution once it's turned around. Also, in this way, it's important to have a witness of this work. Today, that witness is going to be Naomi, who is the first person that you heard speak. that does two things. One, it's a commitment to each of you that we're doing this with integrity. And if any of you have a question about what's happened, you can talk with Naomi. And I'll include stories. Is it okay for you to also be a witness for this work? Thank you so much. No, it's okay. You know, because of what's happened with the Sammamish people, it's hard to find where exactly to put that effort. But this relationship that I have with a man named Squai Quai, he was telling me it would be good to meet with someone who's taking care of the cultural and spiritual health of the people of this area. And so a trusted friend of mine is going to introduce me to one of his trusted friends who does this cultural spiritual work on behalf of the Sammamish people. So if anyone from the Sammamish calls this person up to do some healing work, that's where this contribution is going to go, to make sure that the Sammamish people's health and well-being is being supported by nature of us being here. So, Migai Mawasi.
Thank you, Dakota. And thank you for the beautiful song and bringing us all together in this space. I'd like to bring up at this time my co-organizers, Anita Hiwali, Professor Ali, and Professor Jenner. We are Critical Acts Socially Engaged Research Interest Group, and this is our third, it is our third year. Yes, and we actually started this Critical Acts Artist Residency last year with an artist, a really incredible performance artist, Avery Young. And we continue it every year during the spring quarter. We start the residency mid-quarter. And the artist residency, this year we have Gregg Deal. Some of you have already had a chance to interact with Gregg in, Gregg, in the Mobius Gallery where he's creating an installation. The residency continues our pedagogical framework of community-based learning and research that aims to broaden and deepen visiting artists' engagement with wider communities of the Pacific Northwest. And so Gregg is not only going to be here on the Bothell campus, but will also be on the Tacoma campus, UW Tacoma, and will also be presenting and performing, speaking about his work at the Tacoma Art Museum. So really, this is a multi-campus efforts. Gregg will be, offering workshops, performances, talks, collaborative work, and durational performances, and deepening connections with really thousands of audience members in the Seattle-Tacoma region, including students and faculty across the UW tri-campuses. So I'm going to give the mic to Jed to talk a little bit more about the exhibition, which is in partnership with Cascadia College. Sorry, I forgot to mention that the tri-campus effort is not only UW, Bothell, and Tacoma, but also Cascadia College. And so, Jed will talk a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you all for being here. I just want to give a plug for the amazing exhibition that will be opening on Monday in the Mobius Gallery. Do folks know where that is? You know, Mobius Hall, the giant space over there. If you walk in and walk to the right, you will find that gallery. And the exhibition opening reception is from 3:30 to 6 p.m. on Monday. And you can also come in Monday morning for a live studio and storytelling session with Gregg Deal, or you might encounter him in space on campus as he moves around space that morning in unannounced locations. And I just want to take this very brief opportunity to thank my two co-organizers. Actually, I'm honored to call myself a co-organizer, but I consider them the lead organizers. I will call them Professor A and Professor B. They're all you need, just Professors A and B. And I just want to highlight that for 3 years now, they have been absolutely instrumental to making transformed and transformative space possible on this campus. And they've done that by centering the work of artists and the work of students every step of the way. And it's an honor to be alongside them. Can we all thank them together?
I am Professor A, or Professor Nidayu Ali, or as my students call me, MG, which is short for Madam General. There are two groups of students here who have done an amazing amount of work, and Sleepless Nights 2 put together not only the set design, but also documenting this event with multiple cameras and sound equipment. So you see throughout the space, Global Media Lab is here, and they are recording. So if you are eating, chewing, just be conscious that it might be captured on film and forever documented in this video piece. Secondly, I also want to thank my students of the Alive Festival production class. There are only 15 students, and they have worked endless hours to put together this transformation of this space. From thinking about the set design being these radiating circles, to all the trees that you see over there, which were meant to enter the space and come through a kind of transformation from the Bothell space into what is this imagined into reality space centering Indigenous performance. And so I have a little bit of writing here that's written by student Hannah Kane to help you understand the set design. You have been transported to a forest of trees remade by many hands. The trees harvested from this unseeded land that has now been seeded, replanted, are adorned with paper in the shapes of wishes, art, and acknowledgements. Through this forest, you have traveled not only into a renewed space, but a place within history. Traditions of offering to nature both questions and answers, here in a form inspired by Japanese animist wish trees, have occurred and continue to grow across indigenous cultures. So in our research, we found that these sorts of wish trees really existed across different indigenous Asiatic traditions. Centered here is the son of the Zia people, indigenous to what is now called New Mexico. Originally, when we looked up some circular designs, we were told that it was the Cherokee sun, when in fact it is from the indigenous people called the Zia. Rays radiating out in 4 directions. 4 artists, 4 points of a compass, 4 seasons of a year, 4 seasons of life, the 4 sacred obligations to a strong body, a clear mind, a pure spirit, and a devotion to the welfare of others. This has been created by the Alive 3.0 Performance Festival class, tasked with designing this landscape to honor the artists who have joined us today. So I want to give a round of applause to both Global Media Lab and the festival class in creating this transformation of this space.
Okay, and we'd like to, just before we begin, give thanks to our generous sponsors. We've actually had some incredible support to pull this all together and to make this series of events happen this year. We'd like to give thanks to the IAS Dean's Fund, to the iDisco Research Interest Group Initiative, as well as to the IAS Diversity Council, the Diversity Committee, and the Diversity Initiative. We'd also like to give thanks to Mobius Gallery at Cascadia College, as well as the BEST Grant and the UW Tacoma Social and Historical Group Fund. And is there, I believe I got everyone there. Yeah, so thank you. Let's give a round of applause for our generous funders.
city that make it. The same thing ain't who make me. Living the ones we gave it. It's good to live, we stay in. The lazy gentrification. CD ain't the same. It's often on the same list. We'll be in my blanket. Believe me, we're escaping. We can't afford the payment. We're big understanding. Outside the dragon, in the city, what I want, just watch us. Seem like hobby and drop us off in the rain. I don't give a what, no cell phone stuck to the turf, but swerve and I'm complaining.
and oh yeah. I hopped in my canoa as a flower through the streams, modeling how these antepasados sowing seeds. Woe is me, I'm finding out the foe in me is the nature of creating who's craving to vocally express poetry. Hopefully I'll find my lifeline inside the time I write rhymes. While blood's pulsing through my chrome. One thing about nothing, there's nobody that I won't be. Menos a nadie, yo soy nadie, homie. Blue gas past the sky, walking horizons. Catwalking with appetites, Greeks, Jews, and Mayans. Son of a gun, I'm the son. I become one with the lions. And I've been lying if I said I was a lion's rock. Lying on the tabletop, quick clips to the big stop. And yes, I'm made of rock. Formulated poison plans from where the civilized grannies rock. Like Papa Date or Baseline. Home and tail to my sacred ancient thoughts. Perform of the colored fairies that play with hot lava. Do not bother with the drama of seeing all over this honor. Creation stories, the glory of one of Pele's daughters. So I melee. Oh yeah. Half and die, Lockies and family and Macta we had got. And I always rep the south end. Dakota is mi nombre, Tacoma is the mountain. I'm sailing in the sailor ship, navigating what my sound is. You know that I will own this. I was born near the Snohomish, swimming the fish, swimming to the harbors where the oaks live. Ciphering in the eclipse of moonlight as hero poses. Ancient living spirits dancing in canoes upon the ocean. Tying tight song lines between coconuts and cedar trees. Creating family to land. GCL, so we can't eat money. We deeply breathe in Temescal. Buddha sage, drink the tea. Plastic about the got my Aussie side and blood of the coolie. Pope then Colonel birth in a turtle island metropolis. Since time immemorial, this is where the Dubois live. Displaced kids were claiming our red paint and so hip hop with it. I honor it with glacier flows, I'm dropping in. He had go. Oh yeah. He had gone. The lineage of the lines that I inscribe as I write poems transcends minds, concepts, and timelines and time zones. I'm from the ancient earth crust, the birth dust, the primordial is my home. I've flown around the sky, God, to walk the jungle with Mother Earth on a tightrope. Made it man, your rootless, I pray I can understand the truth. Big brother Cena teach me how to heal as I withstand abuse. And Buddha teach me how to be lonely as a bandit-cool. As my family move away from homeland, the USA stole. Implanted Newton, our movement became a new trend in human history. Visibly called the aspera. Another concept that can capture what we've been through. My pen moved to trace my life back home, and I roll through the infinite black zone. Classic rockin' with my dad's homies. Praying as a star, Hawaii's navigating the jazz songs. Africa's children making melodic atlases. Indigenous craftsmanship, I practice this craft so I honor the masters of the free flow. Onisha with the degree, oh yeah homie, hip hop is that old. Fast forward to sci-fi, I'm 20th and Jackson. Fool is the satisfaction food. Ladies first in hip hop period. It's every Sunday night, African hands doing patterns on drums like brah brah ha. And every scene to LD or open not getting a snack on. You speak true speaking and listen gentrification. Community unity got the back huh. Back to Touchy Beach is a ceremony and song. Before the battle of Seattle, with my time comes, no matter the task, we practice this every pot wrong. While they murder and slave, occupying drop bombs. On the day to the way of there, we go on like Hitai Manota, Hininatanu, Hitai Manota, Hininatanu, Hitai Pinanana, Hininatanu, Hitai Pinanana, Hininatanu. Down, 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 dosi, down, 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 dosi, down, 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 down. Ha! Hita ho, hita imanado, hita, Ita ifi na 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 Nata Di man matuhi Nui fin na 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 sak man siha Finan yaguhit no siha Finan yaguhit no siha
When they ask you who your favorite Indian is, say nobody. Nobody is everybody while being nobody at all. Nobody eats beans from a can, a traditional gesture to honor the great white father's provisions. A commodity to some, a commodity for nobody. Nobody carries feathers around with him, just in case. Nobody could start a fire better than any white man. And I'd put nobody up against a cowboy, any cowboy, for knowing quotes from old westerns. Nobody is Cherokee and Blackfoot and derived from the royalty of indigeneity. He is nobody's Indian because nobody is Indian. More Indian than the most Indian that was ever Indian. While it's true that West Snooty once drank him under the table, he is still the Indian's Indian. He holds on to his Indianness the same way that turquoise-adorned white women clutch their purses when nobody walks by. And when nobody's confronted, he won't back down. He says, hey, $10 for a picture with a real Indian. And when you say no, he punches you in the face and he asks for 20. Nobody is like Gary Farmer, but with sexier moves, a real candidate for diabetes, high risk for drinking all your alcohol, with a high probability of being the life of the party. Nobody has no home, no family, no relations, which is no one and everyone. And he walks the plains where the buffalo roam, his hair long and disheveled, his clothes have been decolonized at the knees, with holes in his shirts and stains in his Indian bits. Nobody is your favorite Indian because he is a noble, honorable, savage fool. You can use nobody as your token Indian, proud statement to your culturally aware friends. And you can spit on him when you're sick of him yelling, "This is Indian land!" Because nobody cares. It's because nobody is every Indian and no Indian. He is your mascot. He is your token Indian joke. He is your court gesture. He will be the remnants of your disembodied heads on the side of your football helmets, your romantic novel Indians. He is the firewater of nothingness. Nobody will be out of your sight while he is out of his mind. Nobody. 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 I exist, but I don't exist. I am here, but I am not here. I am visible, but I am invisible. I am a shadow. I am nobody.
In some ways, I'm an odd selection for a panel on performance because I almost never perform in my work. I create interactive installations where the audience is then asked to perform the content, the metaphor, the action in the piece. The piece on the screen is an iteration of Black Snake Rising, which was originally produced for a Standing Rock fundraiser that was held at the Paramount, and originally was installed on Mirror. It's a depiction of a roiling sea of black snakes filled with the products that are most commonly produced from petroleum, both things that are disposable, necessary, unnecessary, life-saving, indulgent, all the different types of things we use. The audience is then invited to add pieces, disposable items that they use to the piece. You can see in this one that people added thousands. Each act is a recognition of their complicity, as well as a conversation about making a choice, what things you choose to participate in and what things you choose not to. Move to the next slide. This is a piece called Kill the Indian, Save the Man. It was kind of a long, brewing piece that in a way was inspired by an interaction I had with my father when I was about 7 years old. Me and my sister were pressuring him to teach us Salish. He was raised just outside of the Kalo Reservation in Omak. We are Okanagan and Arrow Lakes descent, and also German and English. And he couldn't teach us any Salish because he was forbidden to speak it as a child. His mother was in the boarding school system, as well as his grandparents and all of her siblings, and she was terrified that he would be taken. My father was born in 1950, and the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was recently struck down, you hear that was recently struck down, didn't come into play until 1978. And so this piece is a map of all of the boarding schools for Indian children that I was able to find. There is no consolidated source. They're very difficult to locate. So a lot of them were disguised as either religious schools, military schools, or industrial schools, which gives you a good idea of what children were doing there. So in this piece, all of the names are redacted, and you can use your body heat to unveil the names of the schools. Kind of like working with this idea that obfuscating information requires us to not pester it, that we can make the choice to use our bodies and our intellects to uncover these pieces of knowledge and to unveil them. This is a exhaustive material, and so the more people press their bodies against it, the more heat and friction they apply, the more the names of the schools become unveiled. There's a series of work that I do as well called Coyote Now. It was inspired by Mourning Dove's prologue in her book of Coyote Stories. Mourning Dove was also Okanagan and Snicks, which is the Canadian way of saying Arrow Lakes, woman who in the 1920s created a written record of oral coyote stories. And in describing coyotes' immortality so Sweat Lodge, knowing that Coyote would often get himself in enough mischief that he would lose his life, said that if any single scrap of fur, bone, or whisker survived, the coyote could be brought back to life. And so thinking about that, I started to ask myself, like, well, what's Coyote been up to lately? And I created these series of stories that uses Coyote in kind of similarly traditional ways, where he is the anti-hero that shows us how our bad behavior might lead so that we can make better choices for ourselves. And then I've armed the audience with cast crayon replicas of Coyote's bones. Time is immortality to creativity. As long as we continuously create with Coyote, we can keep him immortal. And so you'll actually see in this one, Coyote is on the run and being chased down by the FBI. It's something called collusion. He was doing bad things on the internet. I think we're rotating, so with that, Stormy, would you like to?
Wow, thank you, Dakota, Gregg, Ryan. I know, you must forgive me. I've been up since 4:30 Eastern Pacific, Eastern Atlantic time, and I've just flown from Philadelphia. And so I just got off the plane for 5.5 hours, and it was delayed 2.5 hours. So I'm in somewhat of an altered reality, but I will do my best. I wanted to share some images for you from my project at the Friar Art Museum, which was called Casino of Palimpsest. I was born here in Seattle. I'm Sufpiaq, Black and Choctaw. I'm second generation Two-Spirit. This is my grandmother. She was brought here, and I ask you not to take photographs, thank you. She was brought here from Seldovia. You can go to the next slide. Oh no, not that one. Wow, we're kind of scattering. I don't know if you can just go down the line, if there's a way. I'm not sure. If you can just click the choice of, I don't know, this wasn't the way. This is a drawing of a photograph of my great-grandmother in Alaska. I'm sorry that it's seemingly out of order. Can you click and see what comes next? Anyway, the project, this is Seldovia. It's a tiny village. I've been studying the culture of my people, and I was honestly shocked to find out that at a certain point, there was like something like 540 of us. Like 540 people. No wonder they were marrying Russians and Scandinavians. They needed husbands, you know. This is where my mother's people come from. They were there for thousands and thousands and thousands of years until the Russians came in the 1700s and began to enslave the Aleutians from the Aleutian chain. And the way that they did this was that they captured the women and the girls and they held them captive. And they abused them and they threatened the men and made the men go to sea in these small kayaks all the way to California to hunt for the Russian crown. So I would say we have a very intimate relationship with colonialism, with genocide, with trauma. It was very difficult even just to study this topic. I had to keep stopping, you know. There was this story about a rock near Kodiak Island. It's called Awok, I believe. And that word means numb. So what happened was that the Russians came and they had cannons. And the people didn't have cannons, they had spears. So they fled to this rock to try to survive. And ultimately, so many threw themselves from this rock and died. So this is the history that I'm learning. I was raised here in Seattle, urban native mixed blood. You can go to the next one. And so I shared some images of my family. This is the flyer from the exhibition. I was able to do this exhibition and it was a culmination of decades of study and research into my family. Because I grew up with my mother, who was a lesbian, Two-Spirit, mixed blood, Sufpiaq woman, who came out in the 1950s. And when I was a little girl, she would take me to the bars with her. And because Seattle had these blue laws, there was also a place for, you know, you had to have food. So she could sit me in the booth and carry on with her business. So I began to think of this place where I grew under the ground, which made me think of the fact that we had underground lone houses in Alaska, and we were repeating some act in doing this over the years. And the word palimpsest is akin to pentamental, meaning that I told a story until it transformed. I sang a song until the melody lifted, rose from dirge, and I could feel the grace notes. And just in closing, I want to say about this. It's a form of experimental memoir that I created to be exploded upon the walls of the museum. I considered the land itself, which actually used to be underwater. I considered the Duwamish people. I considered the hustlers and the working girls who came in when it was built as a prototype of a vaudeville theater in the late 1800s. In 1930, it became one of the first gay bars. By 1955, it was a hustler's den where different people met. And I tried to tell all those stories in this exhibition. And a lot of people came to learn these stories and to see their ancestors also lifted up. Also, my father's people, part of the black migration from down south. And my father himself was Two-Spirit. So my goal with this work is to revalorize my ancestors who have been marginalized for generations and to lift them up. So I will stop there. That's it.
Kind of been for a long time, so I feel like I just want to give thanks to each of you for being here. I'm so blessed to be able to share this space with you all and continue to figure out how our works are weaving. So awesome.
Let's do the last American Indian on Earth. My journey on performance art has been incredibly difficult and easy at the same time. It's been a big part of my artistic practice in figuring out. I mean, I know who I am, but you know, you learn a lot about yourself when you're standing in front of a group of people, trying to create something that is intangible, that is almost abstract, that only embodies your human self and maybe the words that come out of your mouth. And I was introduced to performance work by the late, great James Luna, who is my friend and my mentor who passed away recently. And he had this idea that I loved. I've always loved the way that he talked about performance art. And he said that performance art for indigenous people is incredibly important because it gives us control, it gives us power in real time. It allows us to control what you see and how you see it, and it can turn on a dime. And in partnership to the performance art is installation work, and the way that installation work allows us to embody entire spaces and entire places with which everybody gets to interact, including us in our performative process. So my first performance piece is The Last American Indian on Earth, which of course is tongue-in-cheek. Everybody thinks we're dead, but we're not. We're still here. And what I did is I dressed in this outfit. It's a plain style outfit, but it's also the stereotype. It's what everybody believes that we are. And I purchased all of these things over the counter. I believe the headdress is made in China. Most of the rest of the outfit is assembled either in China or in Mexico. And I wore this outfit in public. As an indigenous person, the stereotype plays such a huge role in forcing everybody's perception of our identity onto us. And in this situation, as a Native person, I am beholding myself as the stereotype for other people, which immediately changes the definition of what you're looking at. Not because I'm a willing participant, but because I'm wielding it as a tool, as a weapon, as a piece that acts as a social mirror. Because when I turn on the cameras, when I turn on video, and I begin to document the way people interact with me, as I did here, you begin to see what sort of presence we have. And so comes the power of existence within space. And the performance art aspect, as well as installation, I believe are two things that allow us to exist in spaces. And immediately upon our existence in these spaces should come the questions that come along with that. What am I looking at? Why is this here? Who is this? What does it mean? Does it align with what I believe and what I see or what I believe is true? All of which, to me, is predicated upon the fact that every single thing you think you know about indigenous people is false. And in the case of The Last American Indian on Earth, in order for me to create something that is comprehensive to the American and Western mind, I have to use those falsehoods to represent existence in space and time in order to engage people in a way and in a language that they understand, even though that language is not true, which is the struggle of our existence. The struggle of our existence is that we have to live your lie in order for us to talk about our truths, which immediately muddies our truth. And so this is the great struggle. It is my hope that this type of work, this conscious work, because we are we are prominent and able to speak in a language that you understand. And because of that conscious understanding of that language, that gives us power to move forward and change the narrative so that it's more appropriate for where we are and where you should be with us.
Can you skip forward about 2 slides? Thank you. So this is a piece called Squeeze. This is, I think, the only time I've physically put myself into a performance. It was for the Bellwether's, the Bellevue Art Museum's Bellwether Art Experience Festival. And throughout this exhibition, in its multiple locations, I essentially pretended to be a worker employed by, let's say, market forces or kind of like big corporation. And we went around acquiring things, acquiring trees, acquiring water, drinking fountains, spaces where people put their bicycles, spaces that you might sit. I installed these variety of price tags and somewhat arbitrarily assigned values to each, claiming them from the public, and then artificially auctioning them off to the highest bidder. And so throughout this exhibition, we'll go to the next slide, I installed them all throughout the city and then made several loops over the span of about 2 weeks, continuously escalating the prices, as well as marking things sold. Fun side story on this bench. I just found this such a strange part of this project. For the most part, some people would feel comfortable talking to me, some people wouldn't. Some people would demand to know what I was doing, to which point I told them they had to speak to my supervisor and they immediately lost interest. But while installing this piece on the bench, I was told that I had to go through kind of a rigorous process with the city for permission on what things I was and was not allowed to price. And I was told that I was allowed to price a bench, but only one that didn't have a memorial plaque on them, because they didn't want me to be pricing a memorial. They also informed me that they weren't allowed to do that. They were all bad for selling off these benches. And so I found one bench in the whole park that wasn't marked, and as I went through pricing it, people kept asking me if they could buy it. They're like, ooh, are you auctioning off the nameplate for this bench? And at those prices, I should have said yes when I was writing a check. But it was just a kind of a generally baffling experience. But it was an interesting piece. They were up for about 2 weeks. And the idea was it was constantly changing and constantly escalating, and working with this idea of who has the right to decide that they can take other people's property, or take the public property, and then tie them into arbitrary capitalist assignments. Next slide. This is a piece called the Post-Human Archive. And it was created as the educational contemplation space for the Double Exposure exhibition, which was at the Seattle Art Museum. That exhibition paired the work of Edward S. Curtis with 3 contemporary Native artists. Edward Curtis was funded by J.P. Morgan and Theodore Roosevelt to create a project that was tied to social Darwinism. He went around with the purpose of documenting the last of the Native Americans, what he dubbed the vanishing race. However, rather than being a historic document, they're often very distorted images. He would carry trunks with him where he would dress people in regalia from other tribes if he didn't think that they looked Indian enough on their own. He would have people move vehicles or move away from light posts. He would edit his photographs to take out any evidence of modern devices. And the purpose of this was to frame Native American people as incompatible with a modern industrialized future. And now it's often looked back to as this historic document of which it's not. And so I wanted to make a conversation about that. And so I thought, if I were going to kind of push this forwards now today, who might be wanting to do that? And so as you enter the space, I'm not going to say Siri, but her voice would come on and say, welcome to the Post-Human Archive Historical Preservation Project, brought to you by the Children of the Singularity and the AI Center for Ethnography. Our mission is to record the final examples of biological human life for the sake of posterity. We are so excited to document you, a prime example of a real-life human being in our archives. If anyone's going to follow us, it's probably going to be artificial intelligence. However, the assertion that biological life is just no longer going to survive is a pretty bold one. Next slide. In this space, rather than being photographed by an ethnographer, people were invited to take selfies. I had 2 backdrop settings, which also referenced the way that Edward Curtis would bring fake backdrops, which he would pin up, so that it looked like people were maybe in caves or in different types of locations. We have the cubicle, where I imagine artificial intelligence might think we live. And then a pastoral backdrop, which shows you can't quite see the blue skies, but you can see the vast industry pumping toxins into the air. So it's kind of giving us an idea of how we might be becoming near our end. And so as people documented themselves, they then went into an archive. The archive was a near replica of the Library of Congress, including its dehumanizing categorization of people by types, by profile, by things that they're wearing, or arbitrary assignments of what role they might have. And I also looked at Edward Curtis's catalog. So the Indians of stone houses became the humans of glass offices, and kind of created this parody of those argumentations. So once people put their images in, we then captured them from the internet or anything that was public, and then they had no say in how they were depicted, and there was no process to correct any assumptions I may have made about them, whether they were single or a CEO's daughter, etc.
Thank you. Wow, it's really, I'm supposed to say, it's really wonderful to be a gathering with, everyone with so many different approaches. I think that's really shines a lot of light on the strength of Indigenous performers at this moment. This is my book. I have about 4 copies. It's called Blues Divine. So these texts were and are part of the Casita Project. I'd like to share some of them with you. Another part of telling these stories, I read something the other day that it said that for every $10,000 more that your family makes, you have an X amount more likelihood of being an artist. So the art world is very class-bound. Poor people don't get very many chances to be artists. So I grew up with my lesbian mom on welfare, getting evicted and living in SRO hotel rooms sometimes. And the young people I grew up with didn't have opportunities to be artists. And I don't know why I'm an artist, except I would say my grandmother was an artist. She came from Alaska, having been taken from her culture, having been taken from the soulful aspect of her own culture, and found soul in Black music. And she shared that with me. So I combined that with some poetry. So I'll read this poem. It's called Grace. Grace, these aren't over me because I live in music. And you can find me there in the discordance and confusion of everyday life. I'm there, in between a blue note and a new note. You can keep that picture there, that's my grandmother. I'm there. Grace, ease on over me, see me and fall all over my everything, for there is nothing you cannot stand or understand. I can rest easy. I trust myself in your hand because I know you love me. You always loved me. Through the bitterest seasons when rhyme left me stranded, you walked with me full of feeling and spoke in total silence. I swear Aretha Franklin has saved my life more times than I can count. And if Billy sent me sometimes to the 57th floor, why she'd always find a way to sing me down. I could glide down easy on Charlie Parker with strings and find myself in April in Paris. Chestnuts and blossom, April in Paris. And somehow at those moments nothing else mattered. At those moments nothing that is not music can touch me. Spirit swathes me like impervious armor, and I understand what keeps me living. You see, it's the sheer goddamn funky swing of it all, the mystery at the heart of it, and at the end of the road, I understand why Nana played that record so much. Songs to torch by. Now, torture is not a widely known about thing anymore, but those folks knew how to get a misery out of you before it became fatal. Why, just roll yourself in it and let the tears and rage flow out. Let Billy carry that cross for you. She already died for your sins, don't you know? So when I get the lowdown miseries, I reach for the tried and true soldiers of survival, and they come singing and moaning and falling out and getting up and exhibiting so much class and grace and style till after some time I feel my soul stretching and straightening up, filling my living frame, and I once again rejoin the human race. Music is my mistress, and she and I will never part. That image there is called I Cover the Waterfront. It was exhibited as a triptych as part of the Casino Project. Thank you.
When we envisioned this event, we had the idea of a braided conversation that would emerge from and be inspired by the collective sharing of artistic practices. And this is following writer Brenda Miller's Braided Heart. The braid is a format in which there is no single narrative line, but rather each artist creates a strand of the braid that develops texture and meaning through the interweaving of different experiences, of different knowledges, of different practices. In this way, we witness an intuitive process that embraces unknowing rather than a kind of Western mode of knowledge as truth to be grasped or to be possessed. The braid's merging and emerging voice refuses ownership by any single person, but rather it weaves a chain of chance associations and intuitive connections each artist makes possible through the work of attentive conversation and exchange. With this structure also comes the freedom to not draw static conclusions. And so we invite at this time, if you all have some of those intuitive associations or chance connections that you're noticing in your work, to begin a conversation, open up the conversation and continue to braid with each other. And we also will at this time ask the audience, if folks are interested in bringing in questions, to just come and stand at the mics, and we will bring your questions into the conversation as we go. And so there's a mic right here, and there's a mic in that corner of the other side.
One of the things that Ed Curtis always comes up in like every conversation talking about aliens. And I have, there's a curator, I live in Colorado, there's a curator at the Denver Art Museum, and he said, I'm the only person he's ever met that calls him Ed Curtis. I don't call him Edward because screw him. But it's funny that like that ends up still being a basis or a litmus for trying to figure out like where we are and where other people think we are. You know? And I loved your insight, the insight that you give, because I know he used these outfits that he had, you know, pre-done, and I didn't know that he would edit things and move things, which really makes sense because those are the images that have created what we know as the stereotype. Those are, you know, George Catlin may have started that process, but it's Edward Curtis that did it. And there's a bunch of people that came behind him. There was a guy that I just co-curated an exhibit about in Colorado Springs named Roland Reed, and he came just after Edward Curtis. And one of the things that he said that struck me, that Curtis also said, was that he wanted to capture what he thinks it looked like, what it really looked like. The problem of which being it's about his perception and not about the perception of reality. And so he's a charlatan, he's a liar, and that lie has been held up as truth for 150 years, and that's crazy. That's crazy. But thank you for bringing that up. And I always think it's funny because Ed Curtis seems to always come up.
Yeah, I ended up working on a couple of projects that were associated with that. So as we came upon the it was the quincentennial, it was a anniversary of something like his birth. A bunch of people who owned a lot of his work, because there is a lot of it, he pre-sold the books and the plates to a lot of people. He was definitely a little bit of a hustler, I'll say. Well, there's a lot of people who own those, and a bunch of the gallerists kind of got together and said, oh, we should make this big thing about it and sell his work. And so this celebration started to form between a lot of organizations on this coast. And the project got transformed once they started bringing Native people to the table. There was a lot of other stories that wanted to be told. There was a lot of events that came through this that ended up being very different. I curated my first exhibition with 20 contemporary artists who break boundaries, stereotypes, and have these amazingly powerful voices, of which Stormy was one. Thank you so much for sharing your work in that piece. As well as the educational space at the SAM, which I've participated in largely because they were focusing on contemporary artists. And there was another wonderful piece that the Suquamish did where they used news images by the press that were taken at the same time. And so you could look at the false depiction versus actually what it was like to live as a Native person at that time, side by side. But the thing I always like to bring up whenever I talk about his project is who paid for it. And that's a question that we don't, I think, acknowledge loud enough, who paid for it, which is why I always name Theodore Roosevelt and J.P. Morgan the railroad magnate, because that framed the entire purpose of that project.
Well, absolutely, because we see right now with the demonization of immigrants from the southern border that in order to, destroy a people's culture, you begin by demonizing them and calling them animals and saying that there's nothing in their culture worth preserving. They're killing Mayan children. They don't want to tell us about the beauty of the Mayan culture, obviously. I just flew on the plane and I sat next to two white women, and since I had them trapped there, I opened up my laptop and they couldn't get out, and I pulled up that picture of the little baby girl crying while her mother's being searched and her mother can't comfort her with ice. And I pointed it at them and I said, have you seen this picture? And they said, oh, and they looked, and the middle-aged white lady and the elder didn't say anything. The middle-aged white lady said, that makes me think of when I went to Canada and I had to show my passport. That's really what she said to me. And so we kind of had a discussion of what was happening in this photograph. And then I rode next to them for 5.5 hours, and they talked about their children and their houses and their vacations and how stupid their kids were and how much they paid for their kids to go to college and all these sort of really mundane, banal, terrible things. And as we were getting off, I said, well, one of the stewardesses was nice. I said, one of them was nice, there was two. So, and then the elder white lady had empathy for her because she said, you have to realize you never know what people are going through. So I got off that plane believing that I live in a country with white people who can only have empathy for other white people. And that's such a really sad realization, isn't it? So I just feel like I'm also thinking about the fact that there are Alaska Native corporations, because Alaska Natives weren't given reservations, we were given corporations, because that served a dual purpose. They wanted to take us away from our traditional ways, which were really more socialist. We share everything. So to get us to become shareholders rather than, tribal members in a real way. So Alaska Native corporations can get no bid contracts from the government. So there are Alaska Native corporations right now that have no bid contracts with ICE. So they are raising money by doing to the children from the South what was done to our children. So, this is something I'm trying to do some work about this and feel effective, because it's kind of unbelievable.
Speaking of being socialist, I brought some fruit for us. In case y'all are hungry.
Nobody wants to watch me eat.
I was enjoying something you said a second ago about how there's different threads and different ways that we're approaching performance as people that come from where we come from, and noticing the different ways that they work and who they're in conversation with and how. And you know, when I was chatting with my friend Squire earlier today about sharing the Coast Salish way of being in terms of protocol, you know, he said that it seems like an incomplete version of the story to not talk about what Western European people have done to the Sammamish people while we're on the land. And then I was like, quiet. Something else that you shared with me is, thank you so much for the water. Something else that you shared with me is that, you know, part of this thing that we're working on is developing a relationship to this idea of the indigenous mind, and that part of that work is to let go of Western constructs. So I'm a little bit confused about, you know, why we need to talk about this thing, and, you know, how do we do this in a way that maintains the integrity of this way that you're teaching me. And then I remembered that I'm queer, and that means that you can do both and. And that's also a way of being in, you know, in our ways, you know, that there's not necessarily binary. So I'm just really appreciating the important work that everybody at this table is doing to call attention to what's happening and what's happened. And also the legacy and the presence of activating our ways of being amongst people and with people. And that made me think about this thing that you're sharing about the Alaska Native corporations, right? That part of the violence that's happening, the way that violence is targeting indigenous peoples is to not just dispossess us of our lands, but also of our ways of life. And how important it is to, you know, to talk about what happens when certain things get corrupted, you know, and how we can start being violent towards other people. Yeah. I'm just noticing those threads and genealogies as a part of this work here.
I think that's so hard about what we do too, is what we do is what we do, you know, and there's this idea that because of where we come from and what our identity may be, that if we have an opinion and if we speak that opinion out loud, that it's not looked at or thought of or considered as a legitimate statement of truth that should be looked at, searched for, you know, whatever else, but instead is ultimately commodified and used to like uphold what this person's an activist. It's like I'm an adult with an opinion, you know, and the commodification of those things, the commodification of our struggle, because every aspect of indigeneity has been commodified from our image to our likeness to these traditions. You know, there's a lot of rich people in Northern California that pay good money for a sweat lodge. And so the commodification of those things is a circle that is not ended. We are still being commodified. Our struggle is being commodified. And so when Standing Rock happened, you could see it. Immediately you could see it. And it wasn't just about standing in solidarity of this struggle. It was that this struggle didn't matter until it was so prominent and prevalent in social media that everybody had to have an opinion or they would just look like an asshole, right? And it was a commodification of our struggle. And so that raises questions, I think, within our work, which is what we're doing being done because we're artists and because we're expressing ourselves as artists, and we are artists that happen to have indigenous voices or queer voices that are also indigenous, that have these intricate identities? Or are we some commodified, fun little thing that you get to escape from, that you can push into a corner in Santa Fe, and that's the only place it exists during Indian Art Market? Where is the legitimacy of our work? Where is the legitimate concern and consideration for our work? Because the things that we say and the things that we do, as you especially I think have expressed, is personal. Art is personal. All art is personal. I mean, I don't know how personal Damien Hirst's work is, but you know, like there is a piece of ourselves that go into this, our voices, our struggles, our experiences, our own thoughts, processes as we try to navigate this place as human beings, this place that is foreign to our spirits. And as we go through that journey, does that journey only have worth because of your perception of the commodification of our struggle? Or does it have worth because we're human beings who are artists and we need to find equal ground in those places? And I'm happy to be surrounded by such brilliant artists, you know. And I love coming into contact with other artists that challenge me. Your price piece, the piece where you put price on it, makes me so mad because I didn't come up with that. That's so brilliant. It's so good. And that stuff, you know, the challenging that we feel as artists when we come into contact with other artists that we love and respect, is something I think a lot of people are missing when they don't realize like what we're doing or why we're doing it. I believe that there needs to be a greater sense of equality and not commodification of our work and our voices, so that we can share the value of our thoughts and our experiences, and people can see it on a grander scale, because the Western art world does not recognize indigenous art as a faction of the art world. We are commodified.
Right. And they also, they're familiar with the trauma porn elements. You know? I found when I was doing my show that people would come up to me asking for more information that was included in the exhibition. And I'd say, everything you need to know is on that sign there. Because there's another form of commodification of making someone into the other. Yeah, something terrible happened to this person, but they're not really people like the one I'm a person.
So as much as I want this incredible braiding to continue, hi, I'm over here, everyone. I need to interrupt. Given how little time we have left, I just want to invite Professor B to do one last round of thanks before we invite Stormy Weber to offer a closing. And I would ask that no one leave during Stormy's performance, during the closing performance, out of respect. And I just want to very briefly thank our friend from the Mobius Gallery, the gallery coordinator, Kathy Brown, who's here, who's been incredibly helpful all week long, and I'm sure will continue to be.
Thank you all so much for the generosity of your sharing. It was really beautiful to see the conversation begin, and I wish we had more time. So I don't want to be like the time, break down. But I do really want to honor this moment that we have shared together, which really is just a moment in time, and honor it with Stormy's closing. So please remain seated through the closing. Again, thank you so much to our funders and our generous supporters. The IAS Dean's Fund, the iDisco Research Interest Group, Initiative, the IAS Diversity Committee, UW Bothell Diversity Center, American Ethnic Studies Curricular Area Working Group, Mobius Gallery, Best Grants, Tacoma Art Museum, UW Tacoma Center for Equity and Inclusion, and the UW Tacoma Social and Historical Studies. Thank you so much, and thank you also for being a part of this event.
And everybody, you can stand and move and you can sing along. This is a Two-Spirit song that I learned from the Two-Spirit gathering that the Montana Two-Spirit Society does every summer, and it's created by Joey Credell and Wade Blevin.
So last thing you said. Like each other, maybe?
Go in peace.
Alright, cool. Cut it? Alright, cool. Yeah. Here, you keep this. You got it. You guys worry about breaking. Yeah, hold this. No, just do the corner. Yeah. There you go. Come on, I need your camera.